Well, hey there, everybody, and welcome to the show. It's good to be with you today, and it's really good to be with my guest, my good friend, Adam Robinson. Hey, Adam, welcome to the show.
Hey, good morning, Jeremy. How are you today?
I am doing great. It's so great to have you on the podcast. Now, Adam runs a marketing strategy and consulting firm called Strategexe. I am a client of Adam's. He has helped me out a lot with my marketing strategy. So, Adam, say a few words about what you do.
Sure, absolutely. Well, thank you for the kind words there, Jeremy. It's been an absolute pleasure working with you. So, I really serve my clients as a fractional chief marketing officer. So, what that means, I come in and work with them as the owners or their executive team to develop a marketing strategy that's going to help them achieve their goals. And then we can help them tactically execute some of those strategies, whether it's working with their existing teams, whether it's working through other agency partners, or in some situations, we'll spin up a team to help them achieve those goals. But the key thing is that we're using data to really make sure that the things that we are encouraging them to do and we're working on is working. And then if it's not, we go through and we make tweaks and adjustments as necessary.
hmm one thing that I really love about working with you is what you just said. You're data focused, and you think, and even beyond that, you just think very analytically. You're always asking, well, why? And questioning assumptions. Especially, like, I'll come to you and be like, oh, I had this great idea, I want to do this, that, and you're like, okay, pump the brakes for a second. Why do you want to do that? What value? It's just like you think in a very analytical way, and it's really, really useful, which is why I think that you're like the perfect person to talk about a topic that I think about a lot, which namely is how to know if a podcast is a good fit for your business. For listeners who don't already know, that's my business, right? Conversa Podcasting. We produce podcasts for B2B brands. And a lot of the discussions that I have with prospects starting out are just trying to figure out, is this something even worth pursuing? For your company. Sometimes it's a good fit, sometimes it's not. So let's start broadly. When you're working with a new client, how do you help them figure out if anything is a good fit? So they come to you and they're like, TikTok. Everyone, we need to be on TikTok. What process do you kind of take them through to figure out if that's actually a good idea?
Great question, Jeremy. So, first things first, it's understanding who it is they serve. So, when we understand who their target audience is, and even within that target audience, who their ideal customer is, what are they paying attention to? Are they of the demographic that is going to be listening to podcast, or are they going to be the folks that's going to be searching YouTube to go find an answer to a problem? So if that demographic is more than likely not going to be listening to podcast or going to YouTube, then maybe it doesn't make sense for that. So with any marketing question, I always like to start with who the audience is. Now, there can be some nuance in that. So you mentioned TikTok. Well, TikTok in and of itself is not an audio podcast or a video con or podcast, but there's elements of that where short form video does make sense. So maybe recording a podcast with video and then breaking that up and using that for social media does make sense. So it all starts with knowing the audience, where they are, what they want, and then aligning the marketing tactics and tools along with that. Now, I will say, Jeremy, that I've been wrong on this before. One of my clients, they're a very large construction consulting firm. They have a podcast, and we're working with them to potentially open up what they're doing. And you know who we're talking about because we've
Mm-hmm.
had them talk to you. And I was amazed to learn that there are some pretty large construction podcasts out there. I couldn't believe it because in my mind, I'm like, why in the world is a construction foreman or somebody in commercial construction going to want to listen to a podcast about that topic? Well, it turns out there's a lot of people, I guess, that want to listen to this kind of information because there's quite a few of them out there. So not only is it really researching and understanding who that target audience is, but then also not relying just on gut instinct, but it's going through and doing the research and digging into the data and finding out, are people really listening to it as well? So I always start with the customer to see if it makes sense to pursue that or not. And in some cases, there may even be the budget or the need to go through and say, hey, can we even create a new space? Nobody's doing this yet for this audience. And if that's the case, well, there's probably a reason why they're not, but maybe they just haven't seen the potential in that. And in that case, it's kind of a blue ocean where a person may be able to go and create content out there that there's not a lot of space in yet. And if they're the first,
Hmm.
that can make that awfully easy too. So it's not always a black and white answer. Sometimes it's very much the art and science where it just depends on a case by
Hmm.
case basis.
So, so let's say client comes to you and they're like, we want to explore podcasting, and we think our audience might be into it. How would you guide them in actually investigating whether it's a good fit for their audience? Like, how do you figure that out?
Sure, great question. So one of the things that I would do is I would go and explore the type of podcasts that are out there. So
Hmm.
are there people in their space that are already doing that kind of work? And so that's really going to clue me into that. Another thing I may do as well is use a tool like SEMrush to go out there and see what are people searching for right now that is topically related to the product or service that this person's offering, because that's often a great tool to go through and even come up with topical ideas and things like that. And then in most cases, if I've done that research to see in their niche, in that space, are there other people doing podcasting? Is there enough search volume on topics that are relevant to what you're doing? Then often I'm going to say, hey, I do think this makes sense. And sometimes it's part of a bigger content strategy in that on a monthly basis, you're going to produce X number of blog posts answering these questions that people are searching for. Well, if you're going to go ahead and do this kind of work to do the research and put this content together, you might as well go through and create audio and video around that topic as well, because you've already done the work, you've already got the research. Let's go through and do it. And then once I've gotten that point, Jeremy, I'm more than likely going to refer them to somebody like you, because I don't do podcasting, I don't produce, I don't know any of that stuff. So I think it's important that they're in the hands of experts who can guide them to make sure that their show is going to be a success. So it's not really that hard, in my opinion. And in most cases, it's pretty straightforward that most B2B brands, especially, and a lot of B2C brands, can really benefit from a podcast simply because it's such a great way for people to understand what you do, to get to know you personally, who you are. And it's just a great medium to connect with people.
So, what would be a scenario where you would advise a company, don't do it? Podcasting's not for you.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think it all depends on a couple things. Number one, if the audience is limited or it's something that they really just may not be interested in. And also, if the person is so busy, they literally just don't have time to do it. So, those are two things that make sense to me. So, I'm thinking right now, and now, Jeremy, this is just Adam Robinson off the top of my head. Okay.
Yeah.
So I would say if I owned a small local plumbing service business, does
Hmm.
that make sense for podcasting? Maybe, maybe not. I think it kind of depends on the goal of the owner and what they're trying to do with that. From my perspective, I'm not searching for a plumber unless something's gone wrong, unless there's a leak, unless, my water heater's not working. I don't care. I don't think about it. I turn on the water and it comes in, and I'm not even thinking about it unless it doesn't. So, in that context, I don't know that most consumers in a market are going to be going out there wanting to listen to a plumbing podcast unless that podcast is targeted towards maybe people in the industry and stuff like that. So, but if it's
Hmm.
targeted towards consumers, I don't know that there would be a whole lot of value in that, at least on a really consistent basis. Now, as I said, I've been wrong before on things like that, so I would have to research it, but just on gut instinct, that's one of those where is the juice worth the squeeze, right? Are you going to
Mhm.
get a return on that out there? Now, again, I could be completely wrong. That was pure instinct, but that's an
Mhm.
example where I would have to really think about it and say, is there a better use of your marketing dollars, your time and resources, where you are going to get a bigger return on that
Mhm.
than just a podcast? So there's one
Mhm.
example.
That really is a good example. And I think I've seen that firsthand. Like a year or so ago, I thought, I live in Bloomington, Indiana, pretty small town, college town, and I thought, I wonder if there's a market for podcasting right here in my own town. Most of the time, I'm prospecting just broadly, like nationally, internationally, even, right? And I thought maybe I'm ignoring opportunities in my own backyard. So I joined a BNI group, Business Networking International, and went to all the meetings and did the stuff and to try to spread the word about what I do and kind of gauge, like, is there a market for it? And at least in my experience, I found not really, that it wasn't a good fit for these local businesses like a plumber or a financial consultant, that has a local business. And I think the reason was because my whole pitch was, hey, podcasting is a great way to meet anyone you want to get to meet and kind of spread the word and network. But if you're local, you don't need a podcast to do that. You can go to join a BNI group or the Chamber of Commerce. There's all kinds of opportunities to meet people in person, not just talking to them on a podcast. So there might be a scenario where a podcast could still add value in other ways, but the core value of it, at least as I see it, just didn't really make as much sense or didn't have as much value if you're strictly a local business. So I think you're right, essentially.
So let me ask you, I'm thinking about this. So, is there a way, even in that context, to where that local service business, if they wanted to bring attention to have fun with the podcast? So maybe this is something like it's, I don't know, local plumber Joe talks about plumbing mishaps like you just could not believe, where they use it as kind of this story thing, like you are not going to believe what we saw last month. Of course, they don't mention customers' names or anything like that, but they almost make it to where it's entertaining. And this is probably not a weekly podcast or something like that, but they're
Hmm.
still getting their name in recognition out there just by making it fun and entertaining.
Hmm.
And maybe they got interesting guests to where the focus is still on plumbing, but it's a unique angle that makes it fun and exciting. So, in those kind of contexts, have you seen something like that maybe be unique where something like plumbing itself, I think, would be a pretty
Hmm.
boring topic, but they could probably spice it up and make it kind of humorous where people would listen in just for the humor or something else
Hmm.
along those lines.
Yeah, I mean, well, first of all, I think there's a great case to be made for making any podcast entertaining.
Sure.
Whoever your audience is, to just try different things and not forgetting that this is a show and there needs to
Right.
be some entertainment value. Um, I I think that the case that I would make for like a local plumber or a local, any kind of business to get into podcasting would be to find value in other ways. Like, so if you're if you do content marketing, or you're on social media and you do spend time and money to get your name, to build your brand on social media, well, you need content for that. And podcasting is, if you do it the right way, it's a great way to generate a lot of authentic content without having necessarily to pay a lot of money to like an outside firm to do it for you. And there's nothing wrong with doing that, of course. I just think if you're doing it yourself, if it's in your own voice, then it's in your own voice. It's more authentic. And so, if you see value in doing content marketing, I think there's a case to be made for getting into podcasting, just because it's such an efficient way to create really high quality content. And what I mean by that is you can repurpose the podcast and turn it into lots of other content, like for what we're doing right now, this episode. I mean, and we did very minimal prep for this, right? I think I sent you a handful of questions like late last night. And now we're going to get probably like a, 25, 30 minute podcast out of this: audio, video. I'm going to get the full length video. I'm going to chop this up into several promo videos. I'm going to transcribe it and write at least one blog post based on this. I'm going to get a bunch of other like pull quotes and everything. So that's a way more efficient way to create content rather than me sitting down from scratch looking at a blank screen and writing a whole blog post, say, on how to know if podcasting is a good fit for your business. That's just kind of coming out of my head. Maybe I'm doing some research online, but this is going to be way better because I'm getting your input, and you're going to be part of that blog post. I'm going to literally quote you. So it's not just me. You know what I mean? I think that's better content,
Sure.
and it's better than I could do just me sitting at my desk banging it out. So I think there's a case to be made, and if you see value in content, podcasting could make sense for a small local business.
Absolutely. And then likewise, when you tag me in the video or on social media or whatever, everybody likes being a part of a podcast, right? So
Yeah.
I'm going to share your episode on my social media channels as well. So not only is it you with your personal networks and social media, your brand networks, but also the same exposure is being doubled because I'm sharing it out to my same folks as well. So the right guest strategy, if that's a part of the podcast, can be very beneficial as well because you're expanding that audience reach out there by tapping into another person's network.
Yeah. No, 100%. Um, and even if you're a local business, that kind of depending on your exact situation, there could be a lot of value there.
Yeah,
Now,
100%.
Adam, you're starting your very own podcast. In fact, just before we recorded this episode, I had the honor of being the very first guest on your brand new show, which was so much fun, and it was really awesome. And by the way, you did a great job as the host. I think you're a natural, totally natural podcast host. But anyway, so obviously you see value in podcasting. So say a little bit more about that. I mean, you were already kind of describing some of the way that you see value, but how do you see, why are you starting a podcast? What's the value for you in your business?
Sure, great question. Well, I like to talk. So that may be the first thing. But no, so it's multifaceted, Jeremy. So I like to talk about quite a variety of things. There's things that's really important to me. So in my business life, marketing, helping people build their brands is something I'm really passionate about. I'm very passionate about helping people live their best life. And that often is done through making sure they've got good nutrition, making sure that they are exercising, and just taking the right daily action steps to be the best that they can be. And there's a lot of voices out there in this space. And what I've learned through this is that there's nothing really new about any of these things. In my opinion, marketing is marketing, whether I'm helping a $50 million brand connect with their customers or whether I'm working with an upstart that maybe do $100,000 in their first year of business. It's still understanding what a person wants, finding a way to connect with that person and effectively communicate with them how you're going to solve their problem. And then when you earn the opportunity to solve that problem, be able to do it profitably. And that's really all marketing is just connecting people. And so, what I'm hoping to do through this podcast is to share my personal experiences, share my life lessons from Adam Robinson's paradigm. It's my journey, it's my experience, and I'm hoping that with the gifts and talents and experiences that the Lord has entrusted me with on my 45 trips around the sun, that is going to help somebody else learn or not make the same mistake that I made. So my first business, Jeremy, I started when I was 19 years old. I grew it to be a very successful martial arts school here in Louisville, Kentucky. And I bankrupted it just because I was ignorant. I was um, a lot of hubris and just a lot of poor decisions. And I fell flat on my face with that. And that was a catalyst by which I kind of do what I do today in saying that I learned these hard lessons. And even today, I still have the scars from that. And
Mm-hmm.
they aren't lessons that I want to repeat ever again. But looking back, I'm grateful for those. in that it gives me a platform and a story by which I can share with other people to go through and do that. So I love sharing these stories. Love being transparent. Like, I'm not afraid to say when I make a mistake or I don't see something that I didn't see. In fact, last week I discovered a new email marketing platform that's designed for cold email marketing. You don't typically want to use a standard email marketing platform for that. And this particular client was actually using it previously. And when I started engaging with them, I didn't really understand the context in which this platform made sense. I'm like, no, I don't think we need this now. Let's switch to this other email marketing platform. Well, over the last week, in working with another client, it dawned on me the value of this platform. And so I went back to this client and say, hey, now I get it, how we can leverage
Mm.
this other platform that I told you all not to do. I apologize. I'm sorry. I didn't see it before. Now I get it. Now I understand how we could use this. And I find that when you are able to do those things in any walk of life, it builds so much trust and so much value because you are not putting on a show. You're not trying to be somebody you're not. So it was really cool that I was able to share that experience. And when those things happen, just like this here, I'm not afraid to share those things because my hope is that it'll inspire other people to say it's okay to be transparent about that. It's okay to
Hmm.
say, I don't know. And so, why I'm so interested in doing this as well, Jeremy, is that I could go on LinkedIn and I could bang out a post with that story. Yeah, that's great. Who's going to read that? More impactful would be somebody watching this clip back and forth, seeing my expression, seeing my animations, hearing the intonation. They're going to get more out of it because they're seeing the Adam Robinson, the person behind it. And then also, as we know that more content's being generated by AI, both written word, graphics, things like that, is it human? Is it not human? Well, when you hear me talking, unless somebody's got a deep fake out there for me, which could be possible, but I couldn't imagine anybody wanted to deep fake me. It's me and it's the real authentic person. And I think people are craving that. So, my goal in the podcast is just to share more of my experience, to share more of my story in a way that I hope is going to impact people. And this isn't necessarily a play for more business for Strategexe or better today or anything else. It's really just to share life because, in my opinion, life is getting more challenging in a lot of different ways. And people need to have inspirational voices, stories, communities, people that they can connect with. And I think people, even though we are more connected than ever via digital devices, I think in many cases we're also more lonely than ever. And so I'm just trying to share in a way to help people. So I know that's a very long winded answer, but there's a lot to the answer of why I want to get this podcast started.
Yeah, wow. No, that's great. And because I know you pretty well, like you do have a lot to share. And the examples you shared just now, I think were really perfect because the like what we're really talking about here is being authentic, right? And that's a buzzword that gets thrown around a lot. I think if you surveyed 100 marketers and yes, is being authentic important to you? 100%, they'd say, "Oh, absolutely." Right? What does that actually mean? It can mean different things, but at the end of the day, I think it just means being human, right? Being yourself. And so much content that's put out there ends up being maybe kind of overthought, overproduced, done by committee. And it just, that's not authentic. It's kind of like something authentic when you see it, right? Just people talking and being themselves and like thinking out loud, you know? And again, I kind of feel like that's literally what we're doing just now. Right
Sure.
right now in recording this episode, and the best podcasts are, really able to capture that. It's kind of like we're at our most authentic when we're just talking with people. And something, if you're in business, you're doing that all the time every day. You're just connecting with people and talking and thinking and sharing ideas. It's just that most of the time you're not recording that, you
Right.
know. A podcast is just you're recording that and then sharing it with other people, you
Yeah.
know. And I
So,
think that's
it's
that's part of
interesting.
the magic of it.
Yeah, 100%. So it's interesting about the authenticity component of this because there's so many cases today where, this politician lied or this happened or whatever. Like in the last week, I don't know if you've seen this, but there was a guy out there named the Liver King. And this
Yes.
guy was, known for being just really jacked and ripped and all that.
Hmm.
Well, it comes out that all along the guy's been on steroids, even though he went on multiple podcasts and
Yeah.
just proclaimed, no, I've never done steroids, yada, yada, yada. And so now this guy has a real credibility problem
Hmm.
because the facade that he put out there, that you could follow his 9 ancestral tenets and do this and all that and look like that. Well, most people that really looked at him that knew anything about fitness or whatever are going to say, you don't look like that without taking steroids. And when it finally came out and seeing his response to it, it's just a lesson in what happens when you aren't authentic, because most people are going to know, and in a long enough
Hmm.
time horizon the truth is always going to come out anyway, in my opinion. So you might as well just be authentic, because that's what people want today. They want to know who you are. And if they don't like you and they don't like your authenticity, that's okay. It doesn't matter. Still be you, because there are a lot of people who are going to be attracted to that, just because I think people crave that true human connection today.
Yeah, right. Great point. The Liver King. Right. I remember my kids at one point, like several months ago, they're like, Dad, check out this guy. He's awesome. He just eats like organs and natural, and look at him. He's so jacked and all that. And I looked at the guy and I was like, he doesn't look natural, but okay, what do I know? And right, that guy has just totally destroyed his credibility. I mean,
Absolutely.
yeah, and I mean, he just straight up lied, right? That's
Straight
like
up.
the most aggressive way of being not authentic, to
Yep. And there's a
literally
lot of
pretend to
people.
be something you're not. you know?
Yep. And there's a lot of ticked off people out there who have eaten raw bull testicles or whatever, because he like encouraged people to do
Right,
that and
right.
sold these supplements that had like, I don't know, all this crap. And it's just crazy. And some of the stuff that people would have done or did do falling into that stuff. But you're right. It was just a straight up lie, just bold faced, brazen, and multiple times too. It's
Yeah.
crazy, man.
There seems to be a lot of that, and especially in a world where, and we were talking about this on when we recorded your show just a little bit ago, AI is becoming more and more a part of the content that we see, and it's getting harder and harder to know, like, did a person create that, or was that a
Hmm.
robot or an AI? The deep fake stuff is fascinating, but a little disconcerting sometimes, and I think especially having come out the other side of COVID, we were all locked down for so long and separated from each other. For me at least, it really brought to light, like, we human beings are social creatures, and we crave real, authentic social interaction with each other in ways that are not fake or manufactured. We need it.
Sure.
And that's what really resonates at the end of the day, whether it's just in our normal lives or in business. Like, that's got to be a core part of how you're connecting with other people. It just has to.
Yeah, for sure. And one of the things too about that authenticity is, don't be afraid to expose the struggle, because
Mhm.
we all struggle. And I think when we're honest, sometimes we struggle more than what we like to let on. Sometimes, I mean, you don't have to expose everything out there, but don't even think that being open about the struggles that's there, there's something I think that is very um, both inspiring and also that draws people to you when you can do that. Because as humans, we all struggle. We all struggle with a variety of
Yeah.
things. It's just the nature of that. But I think, especially for folks that are thinking about doing this in the B2B business space, depending on what the purpose of your podcast is and what you're sharing out there, sometimes I think it's okay to even share some of the struggles that you're having as a business, because I can promise you, no business has it all put together. I think
Yeah.
sometimes people have this idea that the bigger the business or the enterprise, that they've got all their stuff put together and stuff like that.
Mm.
I can tell you, my friend, sometimes the worst run businesses I've seen are some of the biggest businesses. And it's like,
Mm.
how in the world have they even gotten to where they are like that? So,
Right.
again, depending on the purpose of the B2B podcast or whatever, I think that there's a time and a place. But being really authentic about the struggles and how you overcame it and the things you're doing to overcome, I think is important too. And it's something that people should not be to shy away from in some contexts, in others maybe not.
Yeah.
But I think that being vulnerable like that is really important.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to make clear that um, we're talking about this in the context of why is podcasting a good idea or maybe a good
Sure.
fit.
Yes.
Be being authentic and communicating, there are many ways to do that. Podcasting is
Hmm.
only one of them, right? And
Yes.
for any business, you want to have a variety of ways that you're doing that. Not, you don't want to
Hmm.
put your eggs all in one basket, to use that
Sure.
cliched phrase, right? I think the point we're making is that podcasting can be, in a given situation, a good tool as part of a marketing arsenal or lineup, right? It's
Hmm.
never going to be the only thing you're doing. But
Correct.
that because it typically involves or just naturally involves talking with other people and having, unscripted conversations, I think it lends itself particularly well to being vulnerable in that way. And again, like I said before, just kind of thinking out loud without being too guarded or overthinking it. I think it's a very useful way to do that.
Hmm.
As it would be much harder to do that, I think, like in a blog post, for example.
Sure.
You know,
Yeah.
um, Okay, so wrapping things up a little bit here, Adam, what's your main takeaway for, let's say, for any B2B brand, whether they're local or not, that's considering starting a podcast or at least is interested in exploring it? What's your main takeaway advice for them?
So I think it's something that should be strongly considered. As we said at the very beginning, first, understand who your customer is. And this is something that you believe your customer may use or could take advantage of or find value in, then it warrants going deeper. If you're not sure, do the research, find somebody who can. But then going to your point, Jeremy, that in engaging in a podcast, there is so much content that comes out of this, from the clips, from the full episodes, the video, the audio. It can help either align with this existing blog content or it can inform new blog content. This is content that can live on your website, that can drive people to it. It can be a part of your email marketing strategy. It's just such a great way to communicate and connect with people. So, in my opinion, it's something that unless there's a clear no, people just aren't going to listen to it, that it's not worth the time and effort, which I think is going to be, in many cases, a relatively small percentage of businesses, but that the value of doing this is worth the time and effort and resources for a lot of businesses. So you want to align with somebody like Jeremy who can help you understand if this is a good fit or not. Because Jeremy's the kind of person that will tell you, hey, this isn't right for your business and this is why, because he's interested out there in helping people get to where they want to be. And I've seen that firsthand. Jeremy is a trusted resource. And I am plugging you here, Jeremy, but it's that he is a trusted resource that he can help you with this, to figure out if it does make sense or not. And then if so, he and his team can help you. If not, that's okay too, if it's not the right fit. But I think sometimes having that outside perspective to help you understand, is this the right fit or not, can be very valuable. But from my perspective, for most brands out there, it does make sense to at least give this a thorough exploration to see if it makes sense. And then if you do decide to do it, team up with somebody like Jeremy that can at least point you in the right direction to get to where you need to be.
Okay, well, thank you for those kind words. Really
Sure.
appreciate it. And, of course, I could use the same exact words to describe you. In that, full disclosure, everyone, I think I mentioned this up top, but I am a client of Adams, and um, you bring so much value to me. You've helped me so much with thinking strategically about my marketing. And I know that there are a lot of people out there who need those services. So, how can people connect with you if they're looking for help with marketing and want to think more strategically about it?
Yeah, great question. Well, before I answer that, I want to say, Jeremy, when I was giving you those props, it was from seeing you work with clients. So we've got
Mm,
some folks in common, and I've seen your work. So it's not me just espousing those things, but it's me truly sharing from my personal experience and what I've seen. So if people do want to learn about me, the best way to go is to the Strategexe website. So it's strategexe.com, and that's Strategexe. Strategex is literally Strategex plus execution coming together. So that name has some phonetic meaning to it.
hmm
And then you can always connect with me on LinkedIn. It's Adam Robinson, MBA. So reach out either of those ways, and I'd be more than happy to connect and see if I can be of value.
Okay, awesome. Well, folks, definitely reach out to Adam, especially if you need any help with marketing. And by the way, what's your podcast called?
You know, Jeremy, as of right now, it's going to be the Adam Robinson Show. And it's kind of a silly name for that. Maybe, I don't know, like I'm not Joe Rogan or anything like that. But you actually helped inform this because when we were talking, kind of strategizing, you said something, you were like, Adam, the world probably doesn't need another marketing podcast. And you're right about that. It doesn't. There's a million of them out there. But because I'm going to be talking about marketing and business and health and nutrition, and things that are interesting to me, I think that's what it's just going to be right now. So just the Adam Robinson Show.
I love that. I still think that's a great name. And by the way, you actually look a little bit like Joe Rogan. You may not be Joe Rogan, but you look a little bit like him. You do, like you're into martial arts like Joe Rogan. You have a nice, beautiful bald head like Joe Rogan. You're kind of a
Nice.
big strapping guy, so, you
Well,
know,
you know what, Jeremy? If the day ever comes where my little podcast gets a tenth of the
right.
reach of Rogan's, then you're going to get all the credit.
Well,
So,
a tenth would mean that you get 1 million listens per episode. I think he gets at
exactly.
least 10 million per episode. So,
I'd be happy with that.
yeah, yeah, I think so. Okay, Adam. Well, this was just so much fun. This was awesome, and thanks, thanks for your time. As always, great. We'll definitely do this again.
Awesome. Thanks, Jeremy. Have a great day, my friend.